Okay, we're back again here at allpointstv.com. I want to say good morning and afternoon, evening, whatever time you're tuning in the program. We come on live at 2 o'clock here at allpointstv.com. And the name of the program is What's Going On, and I'm the host of the program. I'm George Moss. And we're going to be here for an hour, so hope you'll stick around as we begin to talk about a couple of topics. I think you'll be interested in both of these topics we brought to the studio today, one of which is the situation out in Oregon. And we'll bring some constitutional aspects into it in order to make the discussion more comprehensive. And we will do something we haven't tried here before on this program, and that is to put up some of the wording of the Constitution in the backdrop. And John, I think you're going to do that later, aren't you, in terms of, I'll let you know when the time to put it up. We'll be putting up on the screen some language that's relevant to what needs to go on here in terms of understanding why those ranchers have, you say stand your ground. We heard that phrase in Florida in the Trayvon Martin case. Well, I think we have another standing your ground case. This probably is a little bit more constitutionally grounded, and we don't need to have a lot of folklore brought in here and create a certain kind of synergy around nonsense. This is really a case of standing your ground against the encroachment of the federal government, which I'm going to contend here has no constitutional basis to be doing what they're doing now they're in Oregon, but they did a similar thing in Nevada. You remember the Bundy Ranch situation that occurred there in 2014. Now we are in 2016, and we got the same problem going on in Oregon. And somebody has got to raise the question, well, why is the federal government holding all these different properties, all this land in these western states? 53% in Oregon, for example. I read a statistic. I found it hard to believe this was true, but in checking it with other sources and seeking validation and verification from other sources, I began to see that the reports were pretty consistent about the amount of land that the federal government owns, controls, and sets aside in Nevada. I couldn't believe 85%. It is 62 or 63% in Colorado, and I said 53% in Oregon. But you can go and look at all the land that they have in states like Wyoming and Colorado and Oregon and Nevada and other states. And you have to ask yourself the question, what is the constitutional grounding point for the federal government to own that much land in these western states? And there is a very big discussion going on between, and I need to put this in quotation marks, between the scholars who are arguing from both sides of the fence. I was reading, for example, the claim made by Napolitano, who was saying that the federal government has no constitutional right to own the land in those western states. And then the scholars coming in and getting confused and bringing confusion into it as usual, where they're saying that, well, the Supreme Court has ordered and ruled that in this case and this other case and some others that the federal government does have a right to controlling those lands in those various states. Well, Napolitano is wrong on some matters, and I'm going to try to show today that in this case here, Napolitano is right. And those scholars who are saying otherwise, they're the ones that are wrong in this case. Because the Constitution, I think, is very clear, but you have to be able to read the nuances of the language. I challenged Napolitano in terms of his interpretation on Amendment 14. And it's amazing to me that they're pretty much over there. You can just come here and have a child, and your child is a citizen of the country, and your mother and your father are not a citizen, but your child is. I couldn't believe people are trying to say that that's found in the 14th Amendment, and they can't even read the first two sentences there. They certainly bring that discussion right there is brought to a screeching halt based on the first two sentences in the 14th Amendment, if you can read it. But anyway, I want to show that in this case, Napolitano is exactly right. But you have to be able to read the language and read it correctly in terms of what the Constitution calls for. And I really don't think people can read. And are we stressing reading in these schools now? And some of the scholars who came through the schools when they were stressing the 3 R's apparently did not get a grounding point in terms of looking at not only the language as it is explicitly written, but also what can be implied by it, which we have to be careful there too, because they've taken that and run with it in terms of the Congress, where they're saying, and the courts are also saying, that the Constitution is a living document, and therefore there is in the necessary clause, which is in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, they're saying that particular clause, which is called the necessary clause, they're saying that clause, because the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8 gives explicit directions of things that the government can do in enumeration of powers, then it is implicit in the explicit language in the Constitution, giving them explicit command to do certain things in the country. Then what's implicit is that in the necessary clause, then the implication is that which is necessary to get the explicit things done that is in fact specifically ordained in the Constitution, then those things that have to be done, therefore, to get that done is implied, therefore, in the necessary clause, because it's necessary to have these implied powers to get the explicit powers carried out. And so the beat goes on, right? The beat goes on, and they'll tell us anything. Okay, so let's look at it and see if we can make some sense out of the senseless. Because, it's not so much now as it was in the past, but at one time, everything would go well until the scholars showed up. And things would go well, somebody get hurt, and then the doctors show up and everything goes haywire, because they had practiced their trade, and their trade was a bunch of quacks getting into it, and, what did they know? They didn't know anything about taking these kinds of anesthetics and things of that sort, so you have to bite the bullet, and then they sawing your leg off. You just call them old salt bones. Because they go to medical school. Well, what were they teaching in medical school at that time? If you could read and spell your name, you became a doctor. And we still don't have a health industry in the United States. They talk about the healthcare, industry. We still don't have a healthcare industry in this country. We have a disease care center in the country. And I'm trying to convince my friends. I don't know why I talk to them, quite frankly, about anything that's above, 2 plus 2 and all. Some of them, not all of them. I give a couple of them, some credit for being able to be very discerning, and not many, a few of them. But I try to convince them that you've taken. I was over to a friend's house the other day, and he was telling he wants me to get. I have type 2 diabetes because I like a lot of sugar. John got to start getting the right coffee too. We don't believe in Folgers coffee here at the studio, but I put a lot of sugar in my coffee, and so I have type 2 diabetes. And my friend wants me to take the medication that he's taking. So when I was over to his house last week, the commercial that was actually advertising the medicine, not the medicine, because there's no medicine in drugs. The drugs he was taking for his medical condition, it came on at the time that I was over there watching what was I watching? I was watching it had to be a championship, semi-championship football game. And I'll be watching tonight. I get excited about football when the final game comes on and we get to see who the champion is. Until you get ready to determine the champion, I don't have time. But now we're getting ready to determine the championship. I go ahead and watch it at that point. I was watching the semi-championship last week, and they're going to have the championship game tonight between Alabama. That's my team, the Crimson Tide. I'm from Alabama, so I have to pull for them. I get thrown out of my house. and playing Clemson, which I'm kind of partial toward them also because they're the underdogs, and my intent is to kind of always cheer for those who everybody says don't have a chance. But anyway, I'll be pulling for Alabama tonight because that's the home state, and I like the idea of having breakfast and having coffee fixed and all things like that, and I don't have to move out, and I don't like packing. So I'll be, at least, whenever Alabama scores a touchdown, I'll be cheering. But I was over to my friend's house, and that commercial came on advertising this drug he's taking for his type 2 diabetes. Now, and we both have the same symptoms. So he wants me to take this medication. George, what about your A1C? And you got to take this, and all your legs swelling, and what about your ankles? So the commercial came on, and I was sitting there listening to the commercial, and the medication, if you can call it that, took about 45 seconds of the 1 minute commercial telling you the stuff that you'll get from taking the drug that you didn't have based upon the fact you're trying to treat your diabetes. So you don't have, so you got you got type 2 diabetes, and then when you get through taking the medicine, you got these additional diseases that you didn't have because the drugs have imported some new diseases that you didn't have, and they're putting that in their body and wants to sell it to me. And I'm sitting there looking at him with a jaundiced eye, asking him, I didn't ask him, are you crazy? I asked him, is you crazy? Ms. Reed would not have been proud of me, my English teacher in 12th grade. But I'm sitting there listening to this commercial. So I'm taking something for it. I'm not giving up my coffee, but I'm gonna treat it. But I'm not gonna treat it with the stuff that they're taking, because I understand something they don't take. I was trying to tell them that the hospital is your body. And boy, there were 5 of us over to the house, and boy, did all 5 of them fall off the chair on the floor. The hospital is your body. Have you heard? They're gonna correct me, because what do I know? I only have 3 degrees. Enough for a 4th degree, but stopped when I found out that I'm paying for this nonsense. You got me paying for it. And I was well on my way, 60 hours into the final degree. Well, you get other degrees even above that, and get additional ones on that score as well, but I stopped. Because I refused to give these guys any more of my money when I kept listening to them and realizing I'm listening to these people that sounds like these politicians. So I'm sitting there, and I said, no, the hospital is your body. And I think all 5 guys fell off their chair and asked me, because they're getting ready to teach me a lesson right now, because what do I know? And it said, have you heard of Hurley and McLaren? Yeah, I have. I mean, those are 2 major hospitals in the city. Well, that's the hospitals. And I told them that's not true. That's where the beds are. That's where they imported the beds to fool people like yourself into believing that you're going to that particular place where the beds are in order to get a cure. That's people in the disease care business. The hospital is your body. And what I'm doing to treat my type 2 diabetes is I'm doing what the doctors I don't know if they do it in their own private lives, but they can't make any money if they tell their patient to do it, because then they wouldn't have to have the doctors. What I'm doing is getting my body immune system built up so that I can, in fact, capacitate it to do its job on a more efficient level, so that I can have the diabetic condition treated. At the same time, I can enjoy the benefits of what I like to do without killing myself. And what I'm doing is, what I do is this. I look and see what is the remedy. Like in these books that they're treating things through natural medicine. Like, for example, I noticed in this one book that I got with my bullet, that little machine where you make the shakes and everything, the smoothies, and these juices. And I noticed that every time they would talk about the diabetic condition, they had cinnamon in there as one of the ingredients. They'll say mix banana and almond and this. And I noticed every one of them had cinnamon in it. everyone would always say add cinnamon. That's what I began to realize, that one of the things that ignites the body to produce, more of the thing that helps regulate your sugar. Because at one time we didn't have a lot of sugar in our diet. We had honey, and we didn't know sugar cane. You could make sugar cane and make sugar until we had the slave trade, and so we didn't really. The body needs sugar, but what nature has done is made it possible for the body to create the sugar it needs through the starches that you take, and so the starches are converted into sugar. But when you start to then add sugar into your diet itself, you're compounding the problem and backing up the system where it becomes less efficient to manage the sugar, because you're adding sugar directly into your bloodstream. So I understand that. So what I did was that I was I'm treating it through cinnamon tablets, or something that has cinnamon and chromium in it. And my condition is, in fact, being normalized. And I don't have any of those additional symptoms that he's walking around here with, going to the hospital every 2 weeks and trying to get me to go there. Okay, so much for that. That's not what I came here to talk about. But it's just amazing to me how much misinformation is out there that we get tripped up by. So anyway, these scholars are also getting tripped up. And I just have to dismiss them as, I've been under them, and I've also been with them in different, corridors and seminars and things of that sort. And so some of them just don't have it, and they're not gonna like me saying that, but I am saying it, and they better, and I'm posting on it, and they're not gonna get on that post, because that would be embarrassing for one of us, and it ain't gonna be me. So they're not gonna get on my post. And they don't agree with me, but they're very quiet out there. They better stay quiet too. Because they get up there in public, like this one guy did. One guy, I won't call his name out on the air. He got on my post, he was gonna teach me this and teach me that. And he went and got the dictionary and was gonna tell me what the word means and stuff like that. He's not even on Facebook anymore. I mean, Mrs. Reed, I'm Mrs. Reed's student. Mrs. Reed was my 12th grade teacher. I'm Mrs. Reed's student. And I learned English in her classroom as a culminating class that I had in 12th grade. I had some others in 12th grade too, and I had a Savant and government class. And that was a treat. I had some teachers. And that was before they started talking about how to put a balloon on a banana. They weren't doing that when I was in school. And that was not part of the test. So I want to go and look at the Constitution, because the scholars apparently have a reading problem. And so what I asked John to do was to put up Article 1, I'll go to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18 later, Clause 17 later. I want to go to Article 3, Article 4. Article 4. Don't tell me, John. I know. Nobody's gonna teach me. John is close. He's not there yet. Now he's close, but close only counts in horseshoes. But he's pretty good. Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. And I want to put that up. John, let me know when you put it up, because it's going to be on the screen here, and I'm going to find it in the Constitution and read it to you.
It's up.
Yeah. It's up. All right. See, we got it going on here. So we're going to go to Article 4. Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. I'll find it in the book here as well. And let me read this to you. And you scholars out there, pay attention and get a pencil. And write this down, you boneheads. Now, let me read the language first, and then I'll come back to it, and then I'm going to stress some of the things in the language that you will pay attention to once we point out some of the nuances in the language, which they have missed And that's why they're arguing with Judge Napolitano about his position, saying he's wrong. And he's not wrong in this case. He's wrong in the 14th Amendment. He's not wrong here. They're wrong. That section of the Constitution says this: the Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. And nothing in this Constitution shall be construed as to prejudice any claim of the United States or of any particular state. Notice the last part first, and I'll go back to the first part of it and tell you what's really germane here that they missed. Shall be so construed as to prejudice any claim of the United States or any particular state. If I didn't even explain the first part of it is enough to tell the government hands off in that last part of it. But even the other part tells the government keep his hands off of it as well. Because what they did not see, when I say they, I'm talking about these scholars. Some are jugheads, and some are a little bit better, and they're just fatheads. I mean, I can't believe these people. Let me tell you, numbskull, something. Did you notice in this language here, the word territory is capitalized? If I said the territory in the United States, and I'm talking about the territory within the states of the United States, because they have already become states, and therefore the territory there, that territory in that case would not be capitalized. You understand that? The reason that it is in fact capitalized here is because the country has some virgin territory. You heard of the Northwest Territory that was added to the land in 1787, out of which states will be carved out later. Or have you heard about the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, of which 9 states will be carved out of there later? But as a territory capitalized, they are not states, and therefore as a specific part of the country, but not yet in statehood, is capitalized in that place right there. The only question then becomes, what happens to the territory and the ownership of it once it becomes a state? The federal government only has claims on it once it is a territory, capital T. You understand that? Shut up. One guy said, I couldn't believe that you wrote a post on Facebook and you didn't use one shut up. Yeah, I use a lot of shut ups. The politicians don't know anything, and their knowledge is down to zero. And every time you listen to them, you listen to people who are nothing but windbags. You heard them just the other day when they had the shooting over in Philadelphia. And there's one airhead mayor gets on there. I think Judge Janine did the best job on that situation. She did a 5-minute intro to a program this past weekend, and she was really saying, what are you, stupid? And I was thinking to myself, yeah, that's just about it.
Just, everybody, I've been arguing with people for years before Obama became president. They say, well, I'm sure your Second Amendment, your Second Amendment guarantees are in place because he's a constitutional scholar. Yeah, and that's not all I've read. I mean, professors that worked with him said he wasn't prepared. He didn't know what he was talking about. It was a political stepping stone for him with the teaching role that he was in. And now he's supposed to be a constitutional scholar. I don't think he would. I'd like to put him up against you in a conversation with him.
That would be no contest. Obama when Obama was at Harvard University for 2 years, from 1988 until his graduation in 1991. It really was about 2 years, although you would say, okay, 88 to 91 is 3 years, but it's really, he was there 2 years at Harvard, basically smoking pot and going to class. And when he finished high up in his class, magna cum laude, because if you can breathe and you're in there and you're able to regurgitate what's might have been hollering up there in the front of the room, and you're sober enough to write it down, then you're considered to be a scholar. But Obama's not a constitutional scholar. No way. He doesn't know anything. And if Obama tries to come up against what I'm saying here, I'm gonna tell you something. It will be embarrassing. This man doesn't know anything. Everybody talking about a constitutional scholar. There's absolutely no proof that this man is smart. This man was the one that said there are 57 states and said it repeatedly. The man that took the word corps and thought it was corpse. Corpse is a person that's dead. You understand that?
Well, you know what, though? I'm going to tell you right now. I've dealt with guys who are just old-time guys, shop workers, people who are, weren't formally educated. And when it comes to understanding that little document you have in your hand right there,
yeah,
they knew more about that than a lot of people I knew who were in the college that I was going to. They knew, and the thing is, because they studied that. Back when they were kids, that used to be something significant. Now it's video games. That's all these people care about. And it's like, these people have their own theories about it, but they actually could quote it.
Yeah.
The Constitution.
Yes.
We're talking average person. Now, this guy's supposed to be so stellar. I don't think he could actually tell you the difference between the preamble for the Constitution
John,
or the Bill of Rights or anything. He wouldn't be able to tell you the difference.
They had Jackson down there in Texas, Sheila Jackson, who is as harebrained as anyone in the Congress. They're all harebrains, but she is she and Maxine Waters. They don't know anything. And she was talking about the Constitution talks about what was in the Declaration of Independence. She's over there quoting the Constitution and placing words in the Declaration of Independence in the Constitution that's not in the Constitution but in the Declaration of Independence. And didn't know the difference between the two documents. And these people are leading the country. You got to be kidding me. This can't be real. These people, most of them, I don't know, I couldn't say most. Many of them are lawyers. Now, I was in a room with I was having a study group one day at the library, and there was a lawyer in the group, and he was going to tell me about Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, which has a 3/5 clause in it. And he's going to tell me that clause, he had read, what's that person wrote the book called 3/5 of a Man? That was over core.
Was it one of the Ennis's?
Yeah, that
was it Roy Ennis or?
It wasn't. It was the one before Ennis. Ennis took over from him. He wrote this book back in the 70s. It's called 3/5 of a Man, and they wanted to say that the Constitution described black people as less than human by the 3/5 clause, where the blacks were described as less than human by them being 3/5 of a white person. Now you have to be really a dunderhead to have that interpretation of that language in the Constitution, when it's very clear. Even in fact, it's so to show you how much of a seal they are. Frederick Douglass read the same passage they read. Now Douglass never went to school. Never spent one day in the classroom. Learned to read by hook and by crook by taking white playmates who had gone to school. He couldn't go to school himself as a slave, but they went to school. He would trick him into teaching him how to read. Now here's a man that went to school and read the Constitution, and then went and told William Lloyd Garrison, who was the person that set up the paper in 1831 called the Liberator. This white abolitionist, William Lloyd Garrison, and here's this former slave that has spoken in Nantucket, Massachusetts in 1841, and Garrison heard him speak and said we can use him in the abolitionist cause, and then enlisted Douglass in the abolitionist movement. Anyway, to make a long story short, what I'm saying here is that Douglass went and told William Lloyd Garrison. He said, look, I read the Constitution. I read the article that has a 3/5 clause in it. He said, and I have concluded by reading this document here that the Constitution is an anti-slavery document. And here was a person that read the language and read the nuances in the language and realized that the Constitution is against slavery. It recognizes it, but the nuance is, does it recognize it and then limit it? See, that's what I said about reading the language. You have to understand the nuances of the language. You see, if you can't get a whole loaf when you're doing things in terms of negotiation, I mean, I don't buy this notion that politics is the art of compromise, but since you say that, okay, well, in terms of bartering back and forth with people having different positions, then you got to kind of, do some things here that get some things in, some things you put in there through implicit measures in order to do some things in the negotiation process. So what they did in terms of 3/5 clause, those who were for slavery and those that were against slavery, and what they did was those that were against it, they didn't want to count the slaves as a whole person, because in doing that, the slave power is more powerful in the country. They want to lessen slave power in the country because they don't have slaves where they are. So what they did then was cut the difference between the two different sides, and they said, okay, for the purposes of representation in the House, which is the body based upon population, we will limit the slave in the South to be counted not as a total person, but as 3/5 of a person for the purpose of counting as part of the population of the South. That restricts the slave power. It doesn't add to it. It restricts it. And they missed that. And what they're missing right here in this language in Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, is the capitalization of the word territory. Look at the word territory capitalized there. The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. Now notice they're talking here about disposing of it. Now how would the federal government dispose of, quote, and capitalization of it, territory? They would dispose of it by what? Making it a state. After that point, the disposals occurred because they are now making that which was a territory, capital T, small t when a territory exists inside the states. When a territory, capital T, is outside of the statehood, that is owned by the federal government. Why? Because what state could claim it? If you have the states making claim to it, you have squabbling among the states about which one will lay hold to it. So the federal government, in the name of the states then, over all the states as a centralized power, takes hold of it and holds it and disposes of it when it becomes a state. And so therefore the question comes down to what happens to the land owned by the federal government but disposed of by the federal government, and how is it disposed of? It's disposed of by the federal government when the territory gets statehood, then the federal government no longer has a claim on it. That's what this language is talking about. And when I see the federal government controlling 53% of the land, that means the state only has 47%. The state has 53% of the land in places like Oregon. That is unconstitutional, and that is tyranny. And what those farmers are doing out there, and the Bunnies did it in Nevada, where the claim is on 85% of the land, and it's like that everywhere throughout the West. Because those were the territories that was the last ones that were added into the United States. Because we were moving, we started on the East Coast, and they were moving, like Horace Greeley said, go west, young man, go west. Because that's where the Virgin Territory was. Now, people think that when you have government, that you have rules. And I said this once before in one of my posts. That's not true. When you have government, you have laws. You don't have rules. Because the rules are what they say it is. You have laws. And you have rules that they're not willing to follow. Therefore, the rules do not apply. And you have these scholars right here telling me what the Supreme Court said. Well, why does the Supreme Court all of a sudden, if they're the ones that have all this extra knowledge about everything, and they're all knowing, omniscient and omnipresent in terms of being able to be omnipresent in the language of the people that wrote the language back there in that time and period where they were not there, and don't understand the nuances they put in the language, how is it they found some language recently that says, oh, we missed this all these years, but we now found something in here that allows for same-sex marriage? Why weren't they able to discern it a long time ago? Or when they had the Plessy versus Ferguson case in 1896, why weren't they able to discern that separation of the races is inherently unequal, as they found out in 1954 when the court ruled differently than it had done 58 years earlier? See, I don't care what they say, because the Congress, nor the President, nor the Supreme Court are the foundational component, is the foundational instrument through which the laws of the land should be understood and interpreted. The Constitution is the basis of that. And they want to run and talk about what the Supreme Court did, or what they said, as if their voice is omnipresent. Let me tell you something. I'll be working on this when I get back to the house. I'm starting already, but I went off into a different genre than I had planned when I first sat down in my office this morning at my computer, and I went off into a whole different direction than what I intended. But what I'm working on is two different things that were fundamental in this country that occurred that we've got to look at in terms of how we got off kilter. And what I'm writing now is a two-part series on how we got off kilter in this country. And I would say it's two different events in this country. One is 1861, and the other one is 1913. In 1861, what Abraham Lincoln did, and Abraham Lincoln, without any question, was this country's first outright tyrant in this country. Of that, there's no question. What Abraham Lincoln did in 1861 was lock the states into the Union. And then in 1913, what occurred was, with the passage of the 17th Amendment, it locked the states out of the federal government. And those are two cataclysmic changes from what the framers intended, and that's why we're off kilter right now, and why we have those patriots. That's what they are. Those patriots standing up in Oregon, that this airhead, let me name him, this airhead, Montel Williams. You know, some people are so stupid, quite frankly, that it's hard to imagine how they get out of bed in the morning. This is an ignorant man. And I have to say that because he came out and called for the government, the ones who are exceeding the constitutional authority. But he doesn't understand that, because he doesn't understand and read this document right here. Nor some of these scholars who have read it understand this document here. Those wretches that are standing up on the Constitution, on the Second Amendment, with their firepower. And why are they doing that? Well, I was comparing them to Rosa Parks last week, and some people said, well, Rosa Parks didn't have no guns. That's right. But you see, the reason why they have guns is because the government has guns.
Tells basically, and all these other people are saying, just, hey, they're white, kill them. Wait, they're white, kill them. That's what they're saying. It's like, oh, so because they're white, you're not listening to the argument. John, you're not listening to anything because you have no knowledge of it. You're just because they're white. Yeah. You say, well, you go out against people on Black Lives Matter. Well, these guys are white. They're just doing the same thing. And why don't you take care of like you say to do? There's a big difference. They're not rioting. They're not. John, they broke into one spot. John,
you have hit the nail on the head with a sledgehammer. That is what this issue is about. You see, Montel Williams, who is an unconscious racist, does not even understand on the conscious plane why he had no such objections to people who were burning the city down in Baltimore and in Ferguson. And he never called for the military to go in and wipe those persons out or take them down. In fact, the mayor in Baltimore was saying that she would give them room in order to express themselves. That's what they said. And they did it because they were black. Montel Williams doesn't understand that his call for military force in a place where no one has been hurt, no property has been injured, where there's peace breaking out, and they're calling for a strong arm of the government to intervene. They did not see they're doing it for racial reasons. There's a lot to that, and I could go into that for days, but I won't take up time here to do that. But that's what that is about. And Montel Williams is not even aware yet, consciously, of what it was he was calling for and why he was calling for it. Because that is the subtlety involved in this discussion that we are not having in this country about race, because we don't have any discussion in this country about race. We have discussions in this country about the fantasies about race. The real discussion about race would have to involve in why we have to make up these allegations about the vicissitudes of race in this racism in this country. If it is as extent as they say it is, why then we have to make it up to make it more present than it actually is? Why do we have all these cases where it's made up in places like Sanford, Florida? That's the Trayvon Martin case. Or in New York, we have the case with Eric Garner. Or in Ferguson, we had the case with Michael Brown. And then go to these other cases. Okay, 5 minutes. These other cases, we have Missouri. Go over there and look at what happened over in Missouri, where that was made up. And then go to King College, where that's made up. So we're not having a discussion about race. We're having a discussion about that which is made up, which they say is about race. The racial discussion is the fact we get to talk, first of all, about all this made up verbiage about racism. Also, it's unconscious racism that goes on undetected. That which is in the policies of this administration right now. What Loretta Lynch was talking about last week. Did you notice she was talking after the shooting incident at San Bernardino, California? She was talking about do not, in fact, I will prosecute anybody that comes out making a statement about Muslims in this country and any language that is used that, in fact, call them into question, and maybe some things that you begin to say out in public that may endanger those who are Muslims. They're endangering us by being here and what they're doing while they're here. That was a concern. The concern was not the 14 people that gotten killed. It was the 35 who gotten shot, because 21 others got shot. 35 people got shot altogether, 14 of them died. And her concern is for the Muslims. Why? Who was shot in San Bernardino, California? And why is Loretta Lynch doing what she's doing in terms of what her concern was placed elsewhere? And right now is in Oregon, placed on there, calling them terrorists. Nobody's been terrorized, and nobody has been hurt. No property's been damaged. And they're there. And they're there because the government has 53% of the land in Oregon. And when you're out there like you're on a ranch, you understand your property damage. You don't have any fire engines out there, and you know how you got these little fire water places where these what do you call them, fire engines, these fire hose, what do you call those things that they put them in the ground, and you stick the hose up to it, and then you put the fires out. They don't have those out there where those farmers are, because it's not. You don't run, there's no water pipes running to those places. They have to get their water through irrigation systems and things of that sort. Well water, you have to dig wells. If your house catches on fire, that's a problem. So what they do out there is that they have to do fire prevention. And the way they do that is they burn the brushes around the sagebrush around the housing, the barns and things like that, and they set it afire because they're fighting fire with fire. You've heard of them talking about fighting fire with fire. What they mean by that is that you set a fire to prohibit a fire later on that is not under your control. You do control burning. Well, in the case of Oregon, because the government has all this land it owns in Oregon, they set a fire on their property. The Hammonds family did, and the fire spread to about 1,300 acres, which is like, a stamp on a football field, given how much the land holdings are by the federal government in Oregon. And some of the fire went on to land that is claimed, not owned, because they can't own land inside of the state. There's nothing in this Constitution that allows the federal government to own any land inside of the state. The only land that the federal government can own now, because we got 50 states, not 57 of Barack Obama, 50 states. I don't know what they taught at Harvard. I'm telling you what they taught at Knoxville, and what they taught at University of Michigan, what taught at Michigan State and Eastern. Those are the schools that I did my grad work. In Knoxville College, where I had a grounding point, but not even there, even in my high school. And I knew that in first grade, as a matter of fact, because I used to work with this little wooden puzzle they gave me in first grade. They put the pieces in there we had a puzzle of the United States, and a wooden puzzle. I put it together every week. I work on that puzzle. And as a first grade, I couldn't understand why there was Washington over here and Washington over there. I didn't understand how there could be two different Washingtons. Because I was in first grade, because I did learn later on that there was one Washington state, and other Washingtons over there on the East Coast, which is the Washington that's clobbering the states and doing them in. But I looking at 53% of the land owned by the federal government in Oregon, and it went into some of that land. It was burning the land that was there, 1,300 acres. About a stamp on a football field in terms of size when you look at all the holdings the federal government has. And it objected to this, accused them of arson, accused them of terrorism. Now keep in mind, the terrorists are not accused of terrorism, they're accused of workplace violence. Here's a person trying to keep his property from being burned, and the federal government, which covers that land, by the way, have them brought up on charges of arson and terrorism when they knew what the intent was in terms of setting the fire on the land in order to get the sagebrush, so that later on, if it catches a fire, everything on their property goes up. They were trying to prevent that, and they knew what they were doing. This was not terrorism. It wasn't, in fact, arson. It was controlled burning that all ranchers do when they don't have water available to put a fire out. That's a preventive measure that was, in fact, taken.
Native Americans used to do that too, so they could actually get certain types of shrubs and stuff grow back. They did that too, so they're going to say that's a white man's thing. And I've already heard that objection that the white man's practices that cause decimation, as like they done it too. The Native Americans did it as well. So.
John, it's all a hoax. Now let me tell you what the fight is about right now. If you notice it, the patriarch of the family, who's 76 years old. His son is in his 40s. I think his son is 43 years old. So one is 76 years old. That's the father, the patriarch in the family. And then he has a son that's 43 years old. The son has served, I think, 3 months or 4 months in jail. The father has served a year in jail. And so now you have this extra constitutional agency, the BLM, not Black Lives Matter, the Bureau of Land Management, which is unconstitutionally set up. There can be no law passed according to Article 1 of the Constitution where the Congress can in fact pass off its legislative responsibility off to another agency of government. You cannot in fact do that. And if they can do that, then why would they not then pass off all their legislative responsibilities and then just go out of business and go home? Save the taxpayers some money. The BLM and the National Sentencing Commission saw that they did not serve the minimum sentence based upon the claim that arson was a problem and terrorism was a problem, had decided they did not serve enough time, given that they were there at maximum of a year in the Patriots case and 3 months or 4 months in the case of his son, that they did not fit the minimum requirements set by the Sentencing Commission, which is passing off of the responsibilities of the Congress of the United States, which is ordered by Article 1. These are laws being made by people that are not accountable to the voters. You can't do that under the Constitution. And yet they put them back in jail. They'd already served their term, they put them back in jail. And when they did that, the patriots in this country rose up with their guns because they understood that this is unconstitutional grounding point on the part of the government. There's no grounding point constitutionally for them to do that. And not to give them any additional ammunition, the Hammers turned themselves over to the government to pour that particular, put water on that particular fire. They surrendered when they were supposed to, based upon the claims. But this has been litigated in court because there are several violations, one of which is double jeopardy that's disallowed in Amendment 5 of the Constitution. Once you penalize a person based upon some finding or fault, you cannot then go back behind that finding and do additional things to it because it amounts to an ex post facto law that you're putting in place something that you did not have in place when the initial claims were made against that individual. If they can do that, then we don't have a constitution in this country.
We did that. They did that years ago here. Back there, there's a Rock'n'Rolla Records place. They used to have, and they put it. They said we can't sell drug paraphernalia. Well, they didn't have that in place before this company. They sold marijuana smoking stuff typically, stuff like screens and bowls and stuff. And they said we can't sell that. So they came out and they actually then they worked with the IRS to sufficiently shut these people down and confiscate most of their stock.
Yeah.
But they did that already. I was decrying that too, and people were saying, "Oh, they can do anything they want." I said, "No, they can't do anything they want.
They can't do anything
It's called
they want.
ex post facto laws." And I showed them the Constitution where it's at. It's crickets. These people are just stupid. They're willing to forego it.
We're going to have to stand up on this Constitution, and we're going to have to back this government down. I have something right here that I want to share before I get out the air. I have this comment made by this icon of the conservative movement, Phyllis Schlafly. And one of the articles I ran off because I wanted to make sure I put this in my files. It has Phyllis Schlafly, who I think is in her 80s now, but going back, way, way back in terms of her.
She was in her 80s back in the 90s when I first met her.
Yeah, she may be in the 90s now.
I was actually in the same room with her. I didn't actually shake her hand, but I actually did. She was in the same room as at a conference years ago.
I have a lot of respect for her in terms of her standing almost alone at that point because let's face it, we were during the McCarthy period, when McCarthy was right in terms of trying to ferret out these communists who had rooted themselves in these leftists and these communists that rooted themselves in the Constitution. We now know through the book that's called Blacked Out in History that McCarthy was in fact onto something. If we don't think that he was onto something, look at these communists we have now. Look at the Democratic Party. Look at Bernie Sanders. At least Bernie Sanders is honest. Look at the ones that's not coming out like Bernie Sanders. We talk about coming out of the closet. That's a bigger closet to come out of. There's a whole lot of folks in that closet. But I have this article that says Phyllis Schlafly states Trump is, quote, last hope for America. Now, somebody asked me last week on Facebook, Mr. Miles, do you think that Donald Trump can turn this situation around? And I told them no. I think that he will be an honest broker in it. And I think that he will go in and do the things that he said he's going to do, and he'll try his best to make this country great again. I think he'll try to do that. But Donald Trump is running a business, and he's very good at what he's done in terms of building businesses and things like that. But those businesses have to operate necessarily under the law because he does not wield political power. He has to go to the people that wield political power and get their consent. In other words, is what Ayn Rand said, that the producers have to go get the consent from those to allow them to produce and ask those to let them produce who themselves produce nothing. So now he's going into the place where the rule makers are, who get into places where the rules are made because they do not intend to follow the rules. Those rules are not for them. Those rules are intended for those who are not inside that particular camp. And that's why they want to keep Trump out of that camp, by the way.
Another thing is too with the farmers in Oregon and stuff like that, and the ranchers out west. These people act like a lot of these progressives act like these people are just arrogant people arrogantly using the land. They're producing food for the nation. I mean, and it's like, okay, you're going to some fancy conference, you're not going to have any food on the table because all the farmers you decide to tick off and put out of business. And yeah, I mean, but what do you guys? You're the professional class. You're the elite class. Mm-hmm. You don't do anything other than pass paper around and pass laws. But then you want everybody else to be understanding. Well, I got a vision for the future. I mean, anybody who's done anybody in my life I've known who said they had a vision has been dropping LSD. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I'm not going to follow those folks, you know.
John, that's what I would call the conflict between the politicians and the producing class in this country is a part of what I call psychotic envy on the part of the politicians who produce nothing. And part of the rule making that they set for those who they regulate is they want out of this psychotic envy for those who are the producers and those who have the power and produce nothing is to stop the producers from producing and make them dependent upon the class that are not producers but the ones that are wielding power. And so if you know, the politicians are nothing but regulators. And they just want to regulate everything because part of it is this almost like power being almost like a narcotic kind of effect. That once you start wielding power, you get drunk in the proposition because you want more power and more power. And before you know it, you're engorging upon power. I mean, why would you have to have 70,000 pages now of regulations that are passed to prohibit what government has prohibited what people can do? And how many of those pages do you actually need in order to regulate business? You don't need any of them. You know why? Because of the fact that every day you have to please the consumers. I'm wearing a shirt right now. This shirt that I'm wearing now was once on sale, was once being sold for $33. I went to that. I wanted to buy some of those shirts, but I didn't want to pay $33 for them. I went to that store every week to see if those shirts had gone down. And finally, the shirts went down from $33, went down 1/3 of the price to $11. And that would be what 1/3 of $11. I went and bought 8 of them because they had different colors. Different color shirts. This is blue. This one is blue. And I like the design of the shirt, and I went and bought 8 of them right off at that price. But the point I'm making is that because the businesses did not have coercive power, they could not force me to do business with them at the price, in fact, that they had set for that particular product. And absent coercive power, we don't have a contract until both the seller and the consumer have agreed upon the price that is going to be sold for. He has something to say about it as the producer of the product. I have something to say about it as the person that is in fact consuming the product. And that is that give and take that doesn't have coercion in it, and there is no gun in the room that brings that commercial relationship about, and that regulates the person in business because he's in business to make a profit. He must have my say-so in order to do it. They're out there in Oregon right now, and they're out there based upon the Constitution of the United States under Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. Go and read when you get a chance also Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. And then go and read the Second Amendment, which gives them the right to bear arms. They brought all that to the scene in Oregon, and these are the patriots that are standing up in the name of those patriots who were the founding fathers of this country. These are the patriots. They're not the ones in Washington, D.C. Keep your eyes on it, because as long as you're watching what is going on out there, you're not getting confused by the nonsense of Loretta Lynch. That'll have to stay their hand, because part of their power is in their disguise, that they are people that they say that they are, not the monsters they actually are undercover. And so pay attention to what's going on in Oregon, because that's where the fight is right now. Okay, until next week, I want you to, as always, follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.